Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's 1 p.m. on Tuesday, February 11th, and this is Margie Tatro from GridWorks. We're so excited to have all of you stakeholders and our EPE colleagues with us today for this stakeholder engagement orientation workshop. We are planning to work together to create input for El Paso Electric Company and their integrated resource plan for the period of the next 20 years. Let you know that this meeting is being recorded. This whole workshop will be recorded and available as public information, and the link will be included in our workshop summary, which will also be posted at the gridworks.org website. So as many of you already know, the materials for this workshop and the materials for future workshops will also be loaded on that gridworks.org website, and that will be a great resource for you all going forward for meeting materials and information about this process. So let's go to the next slide. Today's objective is really to start to create an intense dialogue among our stakeholders and between stakeholders and our El Paso Electric team members to inform the integrated resource plan. So we really are going to work hard to find opportunities for two-way exchange, although today's workshop is really just getting started, learning who our stakeholders are, getting a tip of the iceberg on the El Paso Electric system, opportunities, challenges, requirements, and really understanding these two very important groups of people that are a part of this process. We'll also have the El Paso Electric team give that base information about their system, and then we're going to spend an hour hearing from all of you stakeholders. It'll be a very short introduction by each of you on your organization, if you're associated with one, and a topic of primary interest in this process. Don't worry if you have more than one topic of interest. We'll give you an opportunity to offer those as well. But we're going to start out going around the table after the break, hearing from each stakeholder on a primary topic of interest. Also, we'll talk about what we're expecting for stakeholders, the requests of you all as we go forward in this process. And then we'll end with questions and a summary of our next steps before we adjourn at 4 o'clock. Deb, I see in the chat that we're having some audio challenges. Is anyone else having audio difficulties? Solid from Randy. Deb, anything that you are seeing?
No, I'm not, Margie. I'll keep an eye on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If you do have technology challenges, Deborah Shields, who'll introduce shortly, is our project program administrator, and she's handling the technology. So thank you all for the feedback there on the audio. The next slide also shows some reminders about the couple of features we're going to be using on Zoom. The mute microphone button, please keep it on mute unless you're speaking. And the video button will control your camera, especially during introductions of all of you. Please start your video so that we can see your smiling faces. The React button and the chat are other two tools that might be valuable, especially as we ask for specific responses to some things in the chat. Might be useful for you to find the chat button, which is those two little bubbles on your screen up there in the black bar. You'll see the chat button. So let's go on, Deb, and we're going to launch a poll here to really understand a little bit about the stakeholder group. It looks like we've got quite a large group here, which we're really excited about. And we'd like to get a foundation of understanding of how much knowledge each of you have regarding the integrated resource planning process for electric utilities in New Mexico. So our question is going to be, what's your knowledge of the integrated resource planning process for utilities in New Mexico? Your three choices to answer are: a 1, you have no or low level of knowledge; a 3, you have some knowledge; or a 5, you have a high level of knowledge. And so please hold for the poll, and Deb will launch that in a moment. You'll be able to respond directly on your Zoom screen. So please, you should see that showing now, and please respond to the poll. If you've had a chance to respond, I see a couple folks have responded through the chat. Thank you for that. But if you can also please put your response on the poll itself that's on the Zoom, it should say poll quiz. That would be great. And I see a question about an intermediate score of a 4. I'm going to ask you to please respond with a 1, 3, or 5 if you can at this point. Thanks. Going to give just another 30 seconds here for responses, and then we'll display the results. Okay, Deb, thanks for, it looks like we've got quite a variety of knowledge base to reflect here, and that's great. Thank you for responding to that. We've had 25% are at the no or low level, 43 at some knowledge, and 32 or about a third of our folks today with a high level of knowledge. So thank you for that. We are going to ask this question again at the very end of this process in August to see if we've achieved an objective of helping to increase the knowledge base of stakeholders of this very important process. So thank you so much for your response. And Deb, feel free to close the poll and move on to our next slide. Thank you. We're pleased today to have some representatives from the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission here with us, and I'd like to introduce Arthur O'Donnell. To please, Arthur, come off mute and enable your camera, and we welcome you to be here today. So please go ahead and offer your remarks to this group of stakeholders.
Margie, thank you very much. Can you hear me? Although my video is supposed to be operational, I'm not seeing myself. So if you can hear me, I'll just proceed anyway. Okay.
Great, we can hear you. Thank you, Arthur.
Okay. Arthur O'Donnell, I'm a special advisor to the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. And I just very briefly want to express the Commission's gratitude to all of you for participating in this. This will be El Paso Electric's first integrated resource plan since the Commission changed the rule on IRP about 2 years ago. In the interim, we've had successful stakeholder engagement processes with Public Service New Mexico and Southwestern Public Service. GridWorks did an admirable job of facilitating the stakeholder engagement process, and I think that we came out of those processes with two understandings. One is that there's an awful lot of need for new resources, which have been identified by the other utilities. And although the scale may not be the same level, we're anticipating that El Paso is going to be needing to add a lot more resources in the near term, right, in order to kind of help meet the state's ambitious goals for the energy transition. Having a more detailed and involved stakeholder engagement process was one of the primary reasons that we changed the IRP rule, because what previously was in effect was essentially a one-way communication from the utilities to its constituents about what it was doing. And in this process, we'd like to really have more involvement. And so we've really kind of like opened the door for your questions so that you can see how the utilities are working on the assumptions that they put into the modeling. In the other two utilities, there was an opportunity to ask for maybe slightly different scenarios in the modeling just to see kind of like what really made sense for the local stakeholders. And so we encourage that. You're not gonna be able to run the models yourself. We have some kind of issues of licensing to do that, but the utilities have been very helpful and really supportive of this effort. And I think that what we heard out of the other two utilities was that it was a much better process. The other thing that we learned was that it takes longer than we had originally anticipated. Under the rule, we had a 6-month engagement process, but as you know, we're starting a little bit early with the filing expected in September 1st. We have at least a couple of more weeks than the 6 months, so use that time well. We are asking a lot of you. This is very time intensive, and while GridWorks really tries to make the most out of each meeting, we hope that you can participate for the duration, or at least express kind of like what you'd like to see at the very beginning in case you can't stay here until August. So that's really it. The commission is going to be represented by Utilities Division staff through the process. I myself am not going to be involved in all of the various meetings. The commissioners and advisors are really like not to be engaged under the rule, although Miguel Perez, who's also an advisor to the commissioners, is going to be actively monitoring the proceedings going forward. So I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, but otherwise, please make the most of this. It's very valuable for us. We are in a time of great change, and the changes have been accelerated. So I can almost guarantee that what we understand going into this process may change by the time we get to the end. So hang on, and thank you again very much. Margie?
Thank you, Arthur, for providing that context and for welcoming and thanking stakeholders. We do acknowledge the significant amount of time and intellectual capacity that stakeholders participate in this process, that they offer to us in this process. So we appreciate that very much. If you have questions for Arthur, please go ahead and put those in the chat at this point. And we are going to press ahead. We've got lots to cover. So thank you again, Arthur. And also we welcome the other folks from the PRC who are here that you will meet a little later on today. So let me just introduce GridWorks. GridWorks is a nonprofit organization that focuses on facilitating difficult discussions and collaboration in the energy space, particularly conversations among policymakers, environmental advocates, energy providers, utility operators, customers, ratepayers, and a whole host of folks that have a vested interest in the future of the electric system in the Western United States primarily. You've met, I've seen correspondence from my colleague, Deborah Shields, our project administrator. I'm also joined by my co-facilitator colleague, Kathy Boyce, who resides in Colorado and is part of this process. She's our Director of the Interior West. Myself, Margie Tatro, I'm based here in Northern New Mexico. And from time to time, we seek inspiration and strategic input from our Executive Director of GridWorks, Matthew Tisdale, who many of you have met. So that's the team from GridWorks. We are really honored to have been appointed by the Commission to facilitate this process. And we hope to bring to you all lessons learned and best practices that we found to be helpful in the other 2 IRP stakeholder processes that we facilitated a couple of years ago. So let me now introduce the El Paso Electric team members. There are more than you see on this slide, but some of the individuals you will see continuously through this process are Judy Parsons and Michelle Pedroza. And I don't know if you can see the conference room called Palo Verde there at the El Paso Electric office. Many of these folks are in that room. And if I call your name and you raise your hand, people might be able to see you in the room. So Judy and Michelle Thank you for being here. Also, Emmanuel Villalobos, Rhonda Richards Griffin, and Curtis Hutchinson are here and part of the process. Also from the legal counsel, Leslie Padilla and Nancy Burns are folks you might hear from and see in this process. And then you'll hear more from Emmanuel later about the role of E3. Nathan Lee and Ben Elsey are part of the support team for El Paso Electric, and they will be present in many of our discussions as well. There will be additional subject matter experts as appropriate. In fact, some of them have already joined us today, and you'll hear material from them as we get our overview to understand just the basic understanding of El Paso Electric. But before we hear from EPE team, let me describe a little bit about the process that we are going to participate in. So Deb, if you could show the next slide. This, as Arthur mentioned, the facilitated stakeholder engagement has been required since November 2022 for electric utilities to engage with stakeholders for input in their integrated resource plans. If you're interested in the actual rule itself, you can go to the GridWorks website on this project, and we've posted the rule in its entirety should you be interested in looking at it. But part of that new rule requirement is a commission-appointed facilitator to enable these stakeholder conversations. And also GridWorks will be producing a report on how the process worked, what could be improved, what best practices were noted, etc. There are 3 key areas where stakeholder engagement is critical and is enabled by this new rule. First and foremost, modeling. Modeling conversations and stakeholder input in that area is really at the heart of much of this conversation, because out of modeling becomes what's called a statement of need. And this is a place where stakeholders also have input. The statement of need is patterned after the idea of utility is going to need X amount of resources of a certain type by a certain date. And of course, modeling is underpinning much of that statement of need. So those 2 things are tied closely together. Then the third area where stakeholder engagement is critical is the action plan. And this is a set of specific actions the utility would take over the next few years to move the 20-year plan forward. So modeling, statement of need, and action plan are the 3 primary areas of engagement by all of you in this process. Also, some people might ask, on the next slide shows the sequence of how does this process work in terms of what happens after the plan is filed. So you can see on this slide, the stakeholder process is technically beginning 6 months plus a little bit before the filing of the plan. The plan, the integrated resource plan, is scheduled to be submitted by El Paso Electric to the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission on September 1st of this calendar year. And then there are some reviews that happen. There'll be 30 days for public comment, additional 30 days for the utility to respond to those comments, and then 30 days for the PRC's utility division to file a statement regarding whether or not the statement of need and action plan are in compliance with the IRP rule. After that, the PRC has another 120 days after, actually it's 120 days after the filing, to determine if the statement of need and action plan are compliant with the rule or if a refiling will be required. If no actions taken by the commission, then the statement of need and action plan are deemed accepted, and then the utility may go forward if needed to put out requests for proposals or other actions required to secure new resources. So that is a whole nother process that we're not going to go into here with this group. It is a very important part of the follow-up to the IRP, and that has opportunity.
Margie, I think maybe You froze on us.
resource plan, particularly the statement of need and the action plan. So I know that's a lot of material. You probably have questions. Please feel free to keep those questions in your mind. We'll have opportunities to submit those in chat. And I think, Kathy, unless there's anything you'd like for us to add right now, then I will introduce the EPE team. Is there anything, Kathy, you think we need to go over?
Yes, please. Thank you. We do have a couple questions in the chat, and actually the slide is perfect for that. These are questions that went to Arthur. So Arthur, maybe if you could come back on. The first one that was asked is the process once the action plan. Does a utility does not feel obligated to start procurement before the action plan?
No, the utilities have been encouraged not to start acting on the action plan until it has gone through this process. I want to clarify that the commission doesn't make a decision about the action plan. It does accept the action plan, IRP, and statement of need. And the current commission actually took a vote during public meetings. They didn't wait for 120 days after the filing. So, that's the outside on it. So, but certainly we don't want the utilities jumping the gun if there are any particular questions. And we really want to have a good vetting of both the plans and the RFP documents. And there's a separate function in the IRP of an independent monitor who will be working with the utility to ensure that their process for soliciting resources is comporting with the rule and also comporting with what they told the commission they were going to do in the action plan. So it really doesn't make any sense to jump the gun on it. I know that there's a lot of activity in the markets, especially in the West, for securing new resources. But kind of like everything will fall into place if we follow the rule.
Thank you. And a second question for you, Arthur, please, before we let you go. How strict is the regulated market? Can backup power be provided by someone outside your regulated market provider?
In New Mexico, there are very few opportunities for what we might call direct access in New Mexico. The only real opportunity right now is through community solar. And we're in the process of bringing a 200 megawatt community solar program into reality. In fact, next week, there's going to be the first groundbreaking of one of the 49 projects that have been selected down in Belen. But that's really the only opportunity for non-utility service, unless you work out a deal. But usually the utility has to be the intermediator, and certainly the utility is the deliverer of any energy.
Thank you, Arthur. Margie, I'll hand it back to you.
Great. Thank you. Another question that has come up that I know we will get into when we talk with El Paso Electric is that this planning process isn't just happening in a vacuum. There is action that is being taken by the utility from prior plans to acquire and retire resources. So this is not, this is a process that goes on in continuous fashion. And we will get, I imagine people will ask, and we'll ask our EPE colleagues to give us an update at some point in the process, not today, of actions that are already underway through approved acquisition actions. So just wanted people to know that this is not being done in a vacuum, and there is action already in place from prior planning activities. Great, thank you, Deb. Could you just go to the next slide? I'm now really pleased to introduce Emmanuel Villalobos to begin. Get ready for the presentation. As I mentioned, this is just the tip of the iceberg, and we will get into more detail further on. But before Emmanuel comes on and starts the presentation and the team, Deb, if you could go to slide 10, please. What we're going to ask you to think about during these presentations are, first of all, what concerns do you have? What questions or areas do you need to explore further or need more information about? And then after that, after a presentation and a break, we will begin the presentation of introductions by each stakeholder. So I'm asking you to think about what is your top area of interest or primary topic you want to get on the table while we launch this process. So please be listening to the presentation with these ideas in mind. What concerns, what areas for further exploration do you have? And finally, what currently is your top topic of interest? We're going to ask you to hold your questions until the question and answer session comes back to us. And this way, the El Paso Electric team will be able to go through the materials that they've prepared. Don't worry if we run out of time for all the questions. We will record those on chat and follow up with EPE and with all of you to any questions that don't get answered. So feel free to be ready for that Q&A session. You can put your questions in the chat, and my colleague Kathy will be monitoring that for themes or questions that are So with that, let me turn to our team to provide an incredible amount of information to get us all on a knowledge base that starts the conversation. So Emmanuel, over to you.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, Emmanuel, please speak up just a little if you could.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, the GridWorks team, and everybody who's online. We look forward to a collaborative effort over the next 6 months as we get to know each other. So excited that everybody's here. I'm Emmanuel Villalobos. I work for El Paso Electric. I'm the Director of Market Development and Resource Strategy. On to the next slide, please. So this is just our agenda here. We're going to be throwing a lot of information at you all today. This is just a high-level introduction into EPE and our system. So don't feel overwhelmed by anything. We're going to have several follow-up meetings and opportunities to answer everybody's questions. So it's going to take us a long process working back and forth with everybody for us to get everything out there. So, you know, we'll work at this together. Next slide. This is just our safe harbor statement. It's pretty standard. We can go on to the next slide. And for our IRP rules and goals.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Judy Parsons, and I'm the Regional Manager of Regulatory Resource Strategy. And as Margie and Emmanuel mentioned, we're kicking off EPE's 2025 IRP stakeholder engagement process. And that's one of the processes that's outlined in the integrated resource plans for New Mexico utilities, section 17.7.3 of the New Mexico Administrative Code, which is being referenced throughout this presentation as the IRP rule. As Mr. O'Donnell mentioned earlier in the presentation, the IRP rule was recently amended in 2022, and this will be EPE's first IRP filing since that rule change. Now on the screen, you have various sections of the IRP rule, which EPE will be providing as part of our IRP filing in September of 2025. Additionally, we'll have a series of upcoming stakeholder engagement meetings that will be providing context for these topics. You see Appendix A is being referenced on the screen. That's a different section of the rule that goes into more detail on the items listed here, and it's what you can expect from EPE's 2025 IRP. So next slide, please. And ultimately, the goal of our IRP process is to identify the most cost-effective portfolio of resources to supply the energy needs to our customers. Now, the IRP rule outlines the utilities plans to meet our existing and future demand of electricity in accordance with the policies of New Mexico. And we're excited to partner with GridWorks in these stakeholder engagement meetings, and we're really happy to collaborate with our stakeholders and our customers. Again, first of many meetings to be had over the next 6 months, and we really look forward to hearing your thoughts throughout this process. So next slide, please. And with that, I will send it back over to Emmanuel to talk about the transition to an integrated system plan, which is really exciting for EPE.
So, thank you very much. So one thing that we want all the stakeholders to start to get comfortable with and familiar with is you're going to be hearing us throw out the term integrated system plan rather than integrated resource plan. So we are beginning this transition that is going to be a multi-year process. But what we're intending to do here is attack this resource adequacy, resource selection process, planning process from a more holistic view, from a more holistic approach, where in the past, these different types of system planning was done in a vacuum or individually by their different tiers, where now we're going to try and do this from all inclusive. Can we go to the next slide? So, like I said, this is going to be a multi-year process. It's going to take a while for us to essentially revamp the way the utility has looked at system planning in the past. So for this ISP or integrated system plan, we're going to be focusing not only on the generation aspect, but the generation and transmission. And we're hoping if this is successful and we can continue to build on this in different iterations of the ISP to come, we'll be able to start to add new layers of granularity with each iteration, eventually getting into the distribution system and ultimately all the way down to the customer and distributed energy resources. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the drivers for an integrated system plan, like I mentioned, this is going to be a more holistic approach to how we look at generation and system planning. It's going to touch on all of these areas that you see here on the screen. It's going to help with all of our renewable goals, decarbonization goals, the changing landscape as it comes to electrification, and just a better understanding of strategic infrastructure. So we are still meeting all of the requirements that go into an IRP. We're just doing more. So we are affectionately calling it an ISP Lite or IRP Plus. But yeah, we're adding to it. We're trying to give everybody a little more insight, top to bottom, on how we do things. Next slide. Again, here, this is more stuff that we're going to be getting into and follow-up meetings, but again, the benefits of doing a system-wide plan, we'll be able to get more insight into the evolving customer needs. There's going to be more cost efficiency and just overall more optimized decision-making. To the next slide. So like I was mentioning right now, we're thinking that this is going to be a multi-year process where this year's ISP, it's the crawling section here where we're getting this kicked off, and by the time we get into the next ISP, hopefully we've added the granularity for the distribution system, and following that, hopefully eventually we'll get down to the customer DER. So you know, you got to learn to walk before you run, and this is us learning to crawl. We're very excited about this process. There have been a few other entities in the US that have started moving towards an ISP. It seems to be where the industry is heading towards. So we're excited to be a part of that. And these are just a few of the other entities that have been moving towards the ISP. Next slide. And we'll hand that over. Oh, that's still me.
That's still you.
So this is a little bit of background on EPE and its service territory. So you can see there that we are multi-jurisdictional. We operate in both Texas and New Mexico. We serve approximately 460,000 retail and wholesale customers. Our service area is approximately 10,000 square miles. You can see there on the picture on the presentation that our service territory goes all the way from Hatch, New Mexico to Van Horn, Texas. It's a sizable footprint. Next slide. So one thing that you'll be learning and hearing us talk about is that EPE, El Paso, and our service territory, we're a part of the WEC, or the Western Electricity Coordinating Council. You're going to be hearing a lot of conversations and questions because people normally ask, are we a part of the Texas system? Are we connected to SPP? So these are all different operating groups within the US, and we are the easternmost portion of the Western Interconnect. Next slide. This slide here is just illustrative of the different balancing authorities that are housed within the Western Interconnect. The biggest takeaway here is that we actually subscribe to reliability coordinator services from the SPP. So the SPP Power Pool offers different services to different entities across the country. And one of those is reliability coordinator services that EPE subscribes to. Next slide. So for a system overview, I'll hand that over.
All right, good afternoon. My name is Abel Bustillos. I am the Director of System Operations here at El Paso Electric. My department is in charge of the balancing and reliability of the EEP system. As Emmanuel said, we extend over 10,000 miles from Hatch to Van Horn. And so just a brief description of our system. This is an overview of a WEC map. And I really focused in here on what we call the desert Southwest, as you know. And so you can see and I affectionately call it the pork chop, as Emmanuel showed earlier, gray highlighted down there in the bottom. That's El Paso's territory, but respective to that, you can see, locations of interest, particularly Palo Verde and the Phoenix, Arizona area, up to Four Corners in New Mexico. And then we have on the far right, kind of where it started turning green, we have Eddy DC tie, which is another interconnection that El Paso has. So I just wanted to give a kind of understanding, and particularly these red lines are most of them are 345 lines that come into our system from the Western Interconnection. Next slide, please. And so just to zoom in on the pork chop, if you will, our territory, the service territory, you can first see that, the red lines that are 345 are our bulk of our import capacity. And again, up to the right, our top center is actually cut off. AMRAD goes to the Eddy line. That's the additional import path. But you can see that our transmission system consists of 69, 115, and 345 transmission lines that serve our native load. Next slide. And so this is a kind of a holistic, a lot of information here, but due to the distance away from Palo Verde, we have some import challenges, especially with the transmission system. So we try to bring that generation home through an exchange with TAP, a purchase and sale agreement with Freeport, and additional rights with that. What focusing here as well, we look at these blue dotted lines. There's two kind of semicircles. These are our import constraint paths. So the upper one is our Southern New Mexico import capability, actually, and the internal ones are El Paso import capability. So we have to maintain those at all times, respective of Eddy, which you can see the other highlighted in blue. We maintained 133 megawatts of rights that enter from the Eastern Interconnection side.
So Abel, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a moment to be sure you define your acronyms. I know you use TEP. Can you talk about that?
Sure.
So people understand we're
I'm sorry.
acronym heavy. Thank you.
Oh, I agree. I apologize. TEP stands for Tucson Electric Power. Our SNMIC Southern New Mexico import capability. Our EPIC is El Paso import capability. I'm not sure of anything else. Please write it in the chat if I missed any. I apologize for that. I think that's all I had on this slide. Okay, with that, I'll hand it over to Daniel Dominguez. Oh, Manuel, I'm sorry, I apologize.
So this here is just an illustration of our existing resources as we are today or as we were in 2024 and where it looks like we're heading towards by the year 2030. As the GridWorks team mentioned earlier, that it is not done in a vacuum here. There's always continuous improvements being done on past IRP rules. And this is illustrative of that, where you can see that our natural gas footprint is shrinking relative to the increased penetration of renewables and battery storage into our system. Go next slide. This here, again, there's a lot of information on the screen and we will get to all of that later. This is just a breakout of our conventional generation, our gas and nuclear footprint. I think the biggest takeaway that we want you all to look at here is the current age of some of our fleet that we still have operating within our system today. Some are reaching pretty close to 70 years of age. And when it comes to large pieces of mechanical equipment such as these, that is a feat unto itself that our generation teams have been able to keep these up and running as long as they have. Move on to the next slide. Same thing here. This is just a list of all of our existing renewable resources and their year of their planned retirement date. Next slide. And as we were talking about, these are all the planned resource additions. Again, we're going to be covering all of this in greater detail in subsequent meetings to come. So this is just illustrative of the continued growth that we're still doing in terms of our solar, our renewable and battery storage. And resource dispatch, I'll hand over to Danny Dominguez.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Dominguez, and I am the supervisor of real-time trading. My group is a part of the energy resources group, where we effectively look to forecast demand out to up to a couple of days out and ensure that we have adequate supply to meet that demand. Within the next 3 slides, I'd like to sort of emphasize a couple of the load profiles that we see throughout the year. So on this slide, we have shown 2 different load profiles. One of them in blue is the one that we actually have for our peak demand day for the particular year for 2024. We hit a peak demand of 2316 megawatt hours during the middle of the day there, well, towards the latter end of the afternoon. And this happened in June, right? At the same time, in the same year, a more typical load profile that we see during the springtime is one like the orange, in which you see relatively low load development with a peak demand of 843 megawatts for that given day. So the differences between the two are about 1,473 megawatts that we see. Next slide, please. This slide is sort of a breakout of how we plan the day as we come in the morning. The report that you see at the very left-hand side is our system status report that we send out to the company in the morning every single day. And it sort of gives a position as to how we sit on that given day. We take into account demand, peak demand for a given hour, the contingency reserves that we require for that particular hour as well, and then the resources that we have to be able to meet that particular demand. Here's the breakout for the 2024 peak day that we had, June 25th, 2024. We were planning for a peak demand of 2316. We had contingency reserves of 125 megawatts, which make up about 5.4% of peak load. That's thankful to the Northwest Power Pool Reserve Sharing Group that we're a part of, which lowers that need. That day we did have Newman's 3, Newman 6, and Rio 6 on forced outage. And then we also were operating with Newman's 1, Newman 2, Newman 5, and Copper on D rates for the day. I would like to also emphasize in there that we had to purchase 575 megawatts of off-system resources in order to be able to meet load for that given day. And then also another emphasis on the solar output. Solar output for that day in terms of nameplate capacity is probably about 230, of which we received about 196 megawatts during time of peak. Next slide, please. So in comparison to what we see on a more average day in spring, that graph that we see at the top right-hand corner gives a pretty good illustration as to what it is that we're looking at in terms of trying to balance out demand with the resources that are required to meet demand in a reliable fashion. So the line that we see going through those bar graphs, the stack chart, is our demand throughout the day. And then on there, we have the resources, the least amount of resources that we require in order to effectively and reliably meet load. The blue bar is our PV output that we require, and it needs to be online 24/7, 365. And then on there, we also have 2 units that we run within the EPEBA in order to be able to effectively provide voltage control. So that we can keep our transmission lines online and available. On top of that, we have our solar resources. They're in kind of like a reddish color. And effectively anything above our demand line is off-system sales that we're having to engage in order to be able to balance out our supply and our demand for that given day. Next slide. And so now I'll pass it on to Judy.
So as we get into more discussions about EPE's integrated system plan, another consideration that's important are the New Mexico Renewable Portfolio Standards, or the RPS, and I'll talk about those in just a second. So this slide just kind of shows for resource planning overall, we want to have a balanced portfolio. So these are some of the resources for consideration, not necessarily the ones that we will be considering for our modeling purposes, but this is just to demonstrate how we want to balance our portfolio. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, and in talking about the renewable portfolio standards, the Renewable Energy Act of New Mexico provides for incremental RPS guidelines to utilities to make sure that we consistently progress towards having zero carbon resources in our portfolio by 2045. So within EPE's last IRP that we presented, we were at 20%. Right now we're in 2025. So we need to be at the 40% threshold, increasing to 2045 to be at 100% carbon free. So those resources that we're looking at need to be at the reasonable cost threshold at or below that, which is $60 per megawatt hour, or that is adjusted for inflation, or as we refer to the RCT. Now, we just put it on here that Texas does currently have a statewide RPS requirement. However, that will cease to exist on September 1st of 2025. So overall, EPE's ISP will not only plan for RPS requirements, but we're also going to be meeting all of the criterion of the IRP rule, which I talked about earlier. So I know Emmanuel mentioned that this is our first ISP, so it's an ISP light, but we like to think of it as an IRP plus. Next slide. Okay, and with that, I'll hand it over to Emmanuel to talk about E3.
So this here is just to serve in introducing the energy environmental economics team. I believe I saw some of them on the call here. Oh, there you guys are. That's Nathan and Ben. I believe I saw Ben right now. So we're very excited about this partnership. E3 is really a leader in the space here for helping utilities plan and model. So we're really excited to have them on board. I don't know, Ben, Nate, want to say hi to the group?
Sure. Hopefully you can hear me. This is Nathan Lee, Senior Managing Consultant with E3, and I'll be supporting Emmanuel and the EPE team in kind of driving forward this ISP. My colleague Ben Elsey, who's our project lead, has lots of experience kind of in the region and supporting planning, utility scale planning in this region in his previous roles with Xcel Energy, is on the call as well. But he's having some technical difficulties, so he may just wave if I can't see him, but I'll give him a minute.
Yeah, and thanks, Nate. I think I've resolved my technical difficulties just for now. So yeah, just echo Nate's comments. Really excited to be supporting EPE on this effort, and we're looking forward to the next 6 to 7 months in working through the stakeholder process.
Right. Thank you, E3. And I believe that's it for the EPE presentation.
So thank you very much. That was a very dense set of material. So we're glad that we have time for some questions. And Kathy, before I turn it over to you to pull some questions from the chat and before people come off mute, it looks like Arthur, you have a question. So please go ahead, Arthur.
It's not so much a question, but I wanted to at least draw a connection with other planning efforts that the commission is pursuing. While the commission really appreciates moving towards a holistic approach, we're not quite there yet. Just last month, the commission issued a new notice of proposed rulemaking for distribution grid planning, right, which will go hand in hand with the IRP. The idea there is that after the IRP process is completed and the utilities have gone out to market and figured out what kind of new resources there are, there will be a second planning effort that happens in between the cycle. Let's call it 18 months after the IRP acceptance, for planning how the grid needs to be upgraded in order to accommodate the distribution of power from the resources that are coming out of this IRP. Now, many of you may know that transmission planning has been in the past the purview of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and in particular for utilities that are parts of organized markets. That's RTOs, regional transmission organizations, or independent system operators. We're moving towards bringing all of these efforts together into the future, but we're going to go through at least one cycle of having separate IRP and distribution plans. The commission is very interested to see how you're going to approach transmission. It has always been something that the commission has wanted to see out of IRPs, I'm told, and this will be some effort, but it is not called for in the rules. So, how it gets treated is going to be important going forward. And also, just to go back to the renewable portfolio standard, every year the utilities file a plan for making sure that they meet the current RPS standards. The most recent change was in order to move up to a 40% RPS by the beginning of this year, by January. And EPE has moved some resources around and is able to claim that they're going to meet that 40%. But really, we have our eyes on the next iteration, which will be moving up to 50% in a couple of years. And so that will be a big component of what the utility will be looking for in this particular IRP. So that's really what I had to say. We're working.
Thank you, Arthur. Questions, Kathy, let me turn to you next to pull some questions out of the chat that have been posed there. And after we address those, we will come back to have people come off mute, raise their hand, and come off mute and ask questions verbally. We have plenty of time here for some questions. So Kathy, over you to draw upon the question. And Deb, I imagine we might want to go back to the EPE slide deck for some of the questions that may come up.
Sure. Thank you, Margie. And thank you, everyone, for your patience. I know I was dropping in the chat that we'll have some time for Q&A. So I'm going to start at the top here. We had a question from Steve and kind of to Arthur's point here on the distribution system planning. Steve is asking, will there be opportunities in this IRP or ISP process to address both distribution and distributed energy resources in various places?
Yeah, okay, we're off me. Yes, absolutely, there will be. I didn't want to make it seem or imply that those options won't be considered. It's more akin to what Arthur was saying, is these different planning processes have usually been done separate of each other. And we're hoping to start, bringing all of that in together in an entire holistic planning approach. But yeah, we're still going to address everything required in the rule, and we're still going to be looking at the distributed resources, distributed generation, and some of the other ones. But yeah, we're still going to be looking at all of that.
Thank you. And we had a couple clarification questions. And Glenn, I see your hand is up. We'll come to you here in a minute. Actually, in the chat, Glenn, I think you had a clarification on a couple acronyms. I believe this was Abel that was presenting at the time.
Sure.
Two acronyms, PDES and
Okay.
FM.
Yeah, if you can go, I think it's from slide 21. I don't know if you're able to, it's on here, slide 21 hosted. There you go. Yes, I think you're referring to the slide, hopefully. And that's that bottom purple-ish bubble for 100, and that's a 125 purchase and sale agreement we have. And it's not an exchange, it's a purchase and sale agreement, but the PDS is the agreement was formerly with Phelps Dodge, and now it's Freeport McMoran. Is that right? I always get that wrong. So that's what those two acronyms mean, Phelps Dodge and Freeport McMoran.
Thank you. And
Sure.
Abel, will I have you on another clarification question on Newman 6, the gas power plant? I believe it's a combustion turbine.
Okay.
Question of whether that's system jurisdiction or in Texas.
That's New Mexico.
That is Texas.
Oh,
Yeah, so,
that's just a typo on our part. It should say it's a Texas resource.
So there was a system resource. It was originally a system resource plan for Texas and New Mexico. However, I believe it was disapproved in New Mexico, that portion. So we'll be looking to have that as a Texas resource in the future proceeding.
So Judy, if I might ask, for those who are newer to this process, can you kind of walk us through the system versus Texas versus New Mexico, since you are multi-jurisdictional? What does that mean for this planning process in New Mexico?
So looking at a system versus Texas or New Mexico, you have resources, if they're on a system basis, they're allocated to both jurisdictions in which we serve in Texas and New Mexico. If it's dedicated to one jurisdiction, that means it will serve only one state. So that's kind of the distinction. But overall, for our ISP, we do plan on a system basis, but we also plan on a jurisdictional level as well. We'll discuss that more in a future presentation throughout these stakeholder meetings, and that will help give it a little bit more context.
Good, thank you. And we do anticipate really diving pretty deeply into some of these jurisdictional questions at the next meeting. So thank you. Going back, and Glenn, thank you for your patience. I do see your hand, but I'm going to go back to the chat where folks have been very patient. Mary Lee is asking about battery resource, and a statement from EPE saying that a battery resource will provide 23% of the energy in 2030, and asking what energy would be charging that battery.
So what you're looking at on that, we can go to that slide.
23.
Yeah, right there. What you're looking at here is on the capacity value. So overall, 23% of the capacity in EPE's fleet will come from battery storage. That doesn't mean that 23% of the energy will be supplied from batteries. So we're looking at it here from a total capacity value. When you're looking at what energy will fill up the batteries, that will ultimately come down to the capabilities of the facility. If they are, most of these are paired with solar facilities, so they do get backfilled with the solar from the adjacent solar facility. There are some systems that have the capability for what's called grid charging, and that would be some combination of whatever's on the grid at the moment. But here, what we're looking at is total capacity.
And again, for those who are kind of new to this process, I think this is probably a pretty critical piece, is the capacity value versus the energy value. I think you kind of hit upon that a little bit. Can you walk us through the differences?
Capacity versus.
For capacity versus energy was the question?
Right.
So for, I'm trying to think of it.
Capacity, battery capacity, is that the?
No, it's the difference between capacity and energy as we're describing it here. I'm trying to think of, what's the easiest way to describe it.
I think one of the best ways to sort of describe it is when you look at something from a solar profile. Well, let's just look at the main mover profiles. 100 megawatts of capacity is not the same in terms of a nuclear facility versus a natural gas facility versus a solar facility versus a wind facility. So even though, let's just say a solar farm is a 100 megawatt capacity farm, at any given point in time, we as a utility are probably likely to get approximately 30% of that, because it has a 30% capacity factor associated with that particular facility. Where, let's say, a nuclear facility has somewhere in the ranks of 95%, you would at any point in time expect 95 megawatts from that facility. So the variances are quite large. If you wanted to sort of meet demand for let's say 100 megawatts of demand from a solar facility, you would probably have to build out a 300 megawatts worth of solar farm in order to be able to account for that 35% capacity factor that it has involved with it.
Okay, thank you. Mary Lee, maybe if that didn't answer your question, please put your hand up and we can delve into it further. And I'm seeing quite a bit now coming into the chat. So as long as we have the time and the space, I want to go to hands raised and let's hear from our stakeholders. So Margie, maybe I'll hand it back to you to facilitate that.
Great. I see, Glenn, you've got your hand up. Why don't you please go ahead?
Oh, yeah, I had a question about the slide illustrating the summer peak day. And I was wondering about the 575 megawatts of purchased power, specifically wondering if that is typical of the highest peak days. And was there any use of reserves on those days versus purchasing power? And in general, is that business as usual?
Yeah, so towards these summer days, yes, we're pretty heavily importing power. Apart from the 600 megawatts that we're going to be importing from our PV facilities, the 50 megawatts from our Macho Springs facility, we're also making purchases normally.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Bob, can you please hold for a moment? Thanks. Please continue, Manuel.
We're normally making purchases of in the 500.
Glenn, are you there?
So yes, it is very typical. Now, do we deploy our reserves that we're holding back for contingency? No, because then we would become deficient on that aspect. And there is a regulatory requirement that we are holding particular amount of reserves for contingencies alone.
Great. Thank you. I think Mary Lee Souls, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead with your question.
Yes, you told me to, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. You told me to raise my hand if I wanted to follow up. I put it in the chat as well. If the battery, if that chart is about capacity and the batteries are primarily charged with solar, isn't that double counting the battery capacity and the solar capacity?
No, it's not. Because each portion of that facility, if it's a paired resource, or even if they're standalone, each one has its own capacity value assigned to it. So whether or not it's being grid charged or charged from the battery, it's still the capability at that point of interconnection of what can actually go into the grid. That would be the limiting factor there. So no, you're not double counting the renewables and the battery. Each have their own capacity value as to what they can contribute to the grid.
I imagine we'll have to talk in more depth about this because I'm quite confused. Thank you.
Absolutely.
And we will be holding future stakeholder meetings and presentations to go into more details about this too. But just overall, we just wanted to give a high level overview of EPE's system.
Yeah, great, Mary Lee. We're going to put this on the list of follow-up topics. So thank you for raising it, and we'll come back to that because I do think there is more conversation that needs to be had there. Kara, go ahead. I think your hand is up.
Hi, I had a question about whether EPE will be exceeding the RPS in 2030 or and if so, by how much?
So, and I believe Mr. O'Donnell mentioned this earlier during the presentation. EPE will be filing its 2025 REA plan filing on May 1st of 2025. We're kicking off those efforts as we speak to start compiling EPE's plan and evaluating all of our resources into meeting RPS. But like our prior filings, EPE has made every effort to meet all of the RPS requirements. And again, as far as our resource planning, we do take the RPS into consideration, and it will be.
Can you hear me?
This ISP.
Okay, so maybe we need to come back to this and have a more specific conversation. Because I did hear you say you take the RPS into consideration, but will you be exceeding the RPS in 2030?
Again, we're kicking off those RPS efforts and we plan to meet the RPS thresholds as listed in the IRP rule, or I'm sorry, the
Okay,
RPS.
so you're planning to achieve the requirements of the RPS.
Yes.
Okay, I just see a significant shift here in the planning of the resource mix. And then my second question is, does battery capacity replace peaker plants?
Does battery replace peaker plant? So,
Peaker gas plants.
oh, peaker. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
Do you want to?
So yes, the way we facilitate that is like Emmanuel stated, that at the point of connection, we maintain the output that is designed. So just for example, if it's 100 megawatts, the typical behavior is that we have that battery charged, so as the influx of a solar field would decline, the battery discharge naturally to maintain that point of interconnection output. Typically that happens when the sun goes down. So it can, to answer your question, it can be both.
Okay, great.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you.
Sure.
And Margie,
Thank
before
you.
we leave this slide, if I can just address Ryan Brown in the chat, you were asking for a 2030 resource generation mix. Here it is for you.
Great, thanks Kathy for pointing that out. Looks like we have two other hands. Anastasia Stevens, go ahead, please.
Hi, this is Anastasia Stevens. I don't know whether this sort of overlaps both Mary Lee's and Kara's questions. What I'm wondering is in regard to what Emmanuel said about needing the 3 times as much solar, this is a much more general question, is in all your planning and modeling, how much are you focusing on peak hours, or are you just going through every single hour? Does the model go through every single hour of every single day? Because at the peak hour, you don't need 3 times the solar because you're probably going to be pretty close to the peak output of the facility. It's not the 30% capacity factor that he was referring to includes nighttime. That's the annual capacity factor. And in reality, until your peak turns out to be at night, you're going to be, there's going to be solar coming out of, there's going to be energy coming out of those solar facilities that is more than 30%. So I want to know just, and I'm not here to quibble with the specific statement. I want to just have a sense of the kind of granularity of the analysis that's being done, which obviously has already been done. So that's my question. What's the kind of granularity as far as hour by hour, day by day?
On the planning side, we do look at what your peak hour contribution is going to be. That's how we look at the problem from a loads and resources perspective for that, but what your equivalent to what your worst hour would be. However, from the purely modeling perspective, it is dispatched on an 8760 profile. So we are taking into account every hour, not just the peak hour, but that conversation we will dive into in more detail, because we'll have to get into your capacity factors and effective load carrying capability and saturation of renewable solar and battery onto your system, and a diminishing return to their contribution capacity. So that will be a very in-depth, fun conversation for us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that because this is, I think, my 4th, maybe 5th IRP. And the last one, we were told, oh, it's going to be all different in the future with E3, and because we will be looking at, we will not just focus on, here you're looking at the system low load day, and then the other slide next to it was the system high load day. We're not going to be doing that anymore. We're going to be much more refined. And so that was the question I had about the granularity. But I'm sure we'll get to it in the future ones.
And if I could just jump in on the 8760, can you explain that number for us, please?
Where the 8760 is, there's 8,760 hours in a year.
Yep. So hourly planning is
Yes, hourly
yeah.
planning.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Craig Collins, I see you've got your hand up. Please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi, go ahead, please.
Oh, is it working? Can you hear me?
Yes, now we're hearing you.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I had 3 different microphones. Yeah, Craig Collins, White Sands Missile Range. I think my question is about the El Paso territory map. I was hoping that so my goal is, you know, we're at the dead end here of El Paso electric territory, and you know, can we put in the plan that, you know, we need to connect Apollo substation to our main post, Las Cruces substation here. I don't know if you can put that in the plan or something like that. We need a way to mitigate, you know, being at the end of the line here. We need some type of mitigation to you know, we need the circle, the full circle, instead of the V that we have now. So, you know, I don't know if I know it's expensive and stuff, but that would be my goal here. You know, with these vast distances across the desert for miles, and then you get these high winds, and it, you know, it blows down the line over there on Highway 54. You know, we're out of power here for hours. So uh, that's my goal, is to mitigate those situations like that. Over.
So Craig, great. So your question is about reliability for loads at the end of feeders.
Yes, ma'am.
Is that right? Okay, great. We will come back to that. Thank you for voicing it. Chris Leger, go ahead.
Thank you. I have a question about this slide, but I also have another question. So this slide 23, how much of this 2030 plan is it, you know, what you've got on the screen there is expected to be acquired through this IRP action plan? And how much is already under contract or otherwise been selected?
All of this is contracted, right? All of this it's not. This is all under contract or existing, or everything done from the previous IRP. We have not started anything based off of the IRP that we're just kicking off now. So this is all based off of planned existing under contract.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I have another question that I think is, it's a resource adequacy question, so not based on this slide. But so since EPE has declared for Markets Plus, it is my understanding that the Western Resource Adequacy Program, or RAP, is a requirement for participation. So 2 parts to this question. How has EPE participated thus far in RAP? And has EPE been adequately represented in that process? And number 2, how is EPE planning on including Markets Plus and RAP in this IRP?
So let me see if I can get to all of those. From
Keep losing you. I'm looking at the comp sheet. You know, all those low numbers are pretty old.
Bob, I'm sorry.
Crappy
I think
buildings.
you're interrupting here. We were in the middle of a question from Chris.
Here's the problem, that because the
Bob,
market is so
can I ask
glutted
you to
right
hold
now
your
with the
question while we
200
finish?
to 300.
maybe we can.
Yeah, go ahead. Why don't let's focus on the market question first. And Bob, we will come back to you, or if I was trying to chat you on the side to see if you were having troubles.
So let me see if I can remember your questions there, Chris. So EPE has been participating in the publicly available industry working groups for Markets Plus and RAP. So we have been in communications with them. In terms of what plans or effects RAP is going to have on us, the main contributor variable to RAP is moving towards a 1 in 10 loss of load event when you're counting for resource adequacy. And EPE a few years ago had already started implementing its plan to reach that 1 in 10. So our current plan is parallel to what the requirements for RAP are going to be anyway. So we don't expect to see a huge difference there. And I apologize, I don't remember what the rest of your questions were. I hope I got to most of it.
You did for this level, so thank you, appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for your questions. If there are questions we did not get to, please put them in the chat so that we can take note of them and work with the EPE team as we prepare for the following workshop, which will be 2 weeks from today. We're at 2:20. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we're going to do a roll call type process. Well, we'll call your organization, ask you to come off mute, and give us your top priority issue that you feel needs to be addressed in this IRP. I'm going to ask, there are many people on this call who we don't have RSVP information for. If you wouldn't mind during the break, if you could go into the participant list and rename yourself to be your full name and your organization, it would be greatly helpful to us as we have some mysterious entries there that we don't recognize. So please, before you take your 9-minute break now, please modify your name with your full name and your organization if possible, so that we can know who you are. If you also like to be on further distribution information for the rest of this process, please chat to Deborah Shields your email address. As some people, we may have not received your email address for future communication on this process. So at this point, we're going to take a break until 2:30 p.m. That's 8 minutes from now, and we'll come back and hear from each stakeholder in those introductions. Thank you so much. see. Welcome back, everyone. We hope you had a chance to get a drink of water, stretch, get some oxygen flowing again. This is a very exciting part of this workshop, and that is where we get to hear from all of you, the stakeholders. We have quite a good group here today, and over 75 people still on the call. Some of those are our facilitators and EPE team, but the rest of you, we'd really like to go through a process where we give you each 45 seconds to state your name and organization, if you are associated with an organization, and the topic that is top of your list in terms of your priorities. Now, we recognize you may have additional topics and you're free to add those to the chat, but we would like to go around the table hearing from everybody with their first topic as we go through this process. After I call people who have RSVP'd for this meeting, we'll have others that we hadn't heard from, didn't know would be here, do those introductions as well. But we are going to start with those people who are able to let us know they'd be here today. In addition, if you are listening to these other stakeholders today and you realize that there is a constituency or a group or a voice that has not been represented, or an organization you think might want to participate in this process, please add those to the chat as well, because we will be reaching out to any of those groups to invite them to the following workshop. So the instructions are, when I call your organization, please and if there are multiple people from the same organization, we'll ask you all to do your introduction. You'll each get your 45 seconds to name a topic of keen interest to yourself, and then we will go on in the process. So, is everybody ready for this lightning round of introductions? All right, we're going to start with Advanced Energy United. I think is Michael Barrio on today. Michael, would you like to come off mute and be our first? Actually, Michael, before I have you come off, Kathy, I'm going to have Kathy go ahead and give us an example of what we're looking for. Kathy, I apologize. I almost forgot to have you set the good example. Please go ahead, Kathy.
Sure. Thank you, Margie. Good afternoon, everyone. As you heard, I'm Kathy Boyce with GridWorks. I'm based in Denver. My priority interest for this work as co-facilitator is to make sure that our work is productive, that everyone is heard, that our questions are captured and answered, and that the information is accessible. My goal is to make sure that we provide effective scaffolding for you all so that the group can work towards consensus. Thank you, Margie.
Great. Thanks, Kathy. And just so you know what we're going to do with the information that you're providing now, we are going to create a list of those topics that are of keen and most interest to the group, and we'll work collectively with the EPE team to make sure that we're addressing the interests of the group. So now, Michael Barrio, if you're here from Advanced Energy United, would you like to do an introduction? Is Michael not here? Thought I saw him earlier. Okay, well then we'll go on to Alta Mesa. Devin McLachlan, I'm sorry if I mispronounced, from Alta Mesa. Would you like to introduce yourself? Alta Mesa, going once, going twice. All right, how about from Black Forest Partners? I believe maybe Doug Patterson or others from Black Forest Partners. Would you like to do introduction?
Hi, good afternoon. Doug Patterson, Black Forest Partners. We're the founder of the Southline Transmission Project, which we're developing, co-developing with our partners at Grid United. We might have folks from Grid United on the call as well. Primary interest is on transmission, and appreciate the bringing transmission into the overall system planning process. And thank you for the invite.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. How about from the Borderplex Alliance? Borderplex Alliance, Marcos Delgado, are you with us? Borderplex Alliance. All right, how about from the Borderplex Digital Assets? D. Vaughn from the Borderplex Digital Assets.
Hey everyone, yeah, thanks for doing this. Hopefully everyone can hear me. Main interest from our side, short and sweet, is just serving large load customers and everything that's involved with getting large load customers to a certain spot on the grid. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much for being here. We've got representatives from the city of El Paso, I believe. Ian, are you here from the city of El Paso? Or anybody else from the city of El Paso organizations? City of El Paso? Let me go back to Blacktail Energy. I think we had Joe Navarre, but I think he was not able to attend. Is there someone else from Blacktail Energy that is here? Okay, thank you. How about from the city of Las Cruces? I know Anastasia is here, as we heard her earlier. Anastasia, would you like to do an introduction and repeat whatever your top interest is?
Well, I'm here, and I believe that Charlie Mahady was here earlier. I went through the whole list at the start of the show. So, Charlie, you still here?
Yeah, I'm still here too. Hi, Anastasia.
Hi, Charlie. Put on your picture so everybody can see you.
I'm at home. I've got a cold right now, so
okay.
not made up for the camera. But
okay, well, we're familiar with a lot of these issues, and of course, ultimately, our goal is reliable, efficient, very cost efficient service. But Mike, I think one of the things we'd like to focus on, and it reflects some other questions that have come up, is how will EPE be approaching and modeling and addressing transmission needs and current limitations for serving its existing resources, for potential new loads, and for off-system sales and purchases. And this is particularly provoked by the recent announcement about EPE joining the SPP market, as opposed to the WEAN, which they've been in currently.
As opposed to what? Sorry, Anastasia.
As opposed to the CAISO's Western Energy Imbalance Market.
Great.
They just made an announcement about what seems to be potentially a very significant change in kind of overall approach to things. Maybe not.
Great. Great, thank you. Charlie, would you like to add your introduction?
yeah, hi, my name is Charlie Mahady. I'm a sustainability specialist for the Sustainability Office for the City of Las Cruces. I think we're interested in all the things that Anastasia just shared there, and things like distributed generation and storage, and how that's going to affect pricing, especially for residential customers, in regards to beneficial electrification still being affordable for low-income households. Yeah, and then energy trading, of course, is something that we're really interested in, as it might inform our municipal decisions about our distributed generation as well. So, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you, Charlie. Anybody else from the city of Las Cruces? Did we miss anyone from that organization? Okay, let's move on to the Coalition for Clean, Affordable Energy. I think Kara Lynch is here. Kara, would you like to do introduction and name a topic of your keen interest?
Sure. Waiting for the camera. Hi, everyone. My name's Kara Lynch. I'm with the Coalition for Clean, Affordable Energy, and we advocate before the Public Regulations Commission on behalf of environmental organizations regionally, locally, and nationally. I think our main concern is a cleaner grid and affordable rates, hence the Coalition for Clean, Affordable Energy.
Great. Thanks, Kara. Appreciate that.
Yep.
Glad you're here.
Thanks.
Oh, it looks like next representation is from Colliers. Bob Feinberg, I think we heard a bit from you earlier, but didn't give you a chance to speak. So Bob and Rick Stows from colliers.com. Would you like to do introductions? Colliers, Bob or Rick?
Margie, it looks like Bob is not with us and he is maybe dropped off.
Okay, thank you. How about from Creation Energy? Chris Hickman from Creation Energy. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Chris Hickman with Creation Energy. Our top priority is helping people better understand how the grid actually operates and finding more collaborative solutions between the utility and all of their stakeholders to work in a more effective partnership to achieve the resiliency and reliability of the grid and affordable structures.
Great, Chris, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time and your mission. So, the next group of people we're calling customers. These are individuals who have expressed an interest in this process. And I'll begin with Dawn Kurtz. Dawn, I believe you've got a number of topics that you're going to add to the chat. But would you like to introduce yourself and list at least your highest priority topic?
Sure. My name is Don Kurtz, and I'm just a citizen advocate. I've participated in the last 2 IRPs, and I'm excited about the scope of this one and all that it can cover. One of my top interests involves a section of the new rule, section 17.7.3.6 D1, which, talking about the objectives of the planning process, requires that in proposing cost-effective resources, I'm quoting now, quote, in proposing cost-effective resources, utilities shall prioritize those that best comply with the state's requirements for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, fostering clean energy development, and grid modernization. And so that means to me, and I think that's what it means pretty clearly, is that the resources be chosen that can produce reduced carbon emissions as a priority criterion with what we're talking about here. There's 2 sections of the objectives in this section, and the rest lists all the resources that are going to be included. And this has equal priority that we need to take those things into account. So I just want to call attention to that. I hope we'll address it fully. And that's my top interest. And all the others I can put in the chat.
Great. Thank you, Don. Appreciate that. Next customer, Dwight Eggers, is also a customer interested individual. Dwight, would you like to introduce yourself and list your top topic?
Yes, this is my first participation in an IRP. I've read past iterations. I am associated with Don's Las Cruces group. I don't advocate for anyone. I'm mainly an inquisitive El Paso Electric customer. My interest is to advance the New Mexico's renewable portfolio standard in the most efficient and equitable way. Topics for the IRP that particular interest to me is the modeling and the discussion earlier around slides 17 and 23 are represent well where I have the same questions.
Great. Great. Thank you, Dwight. Appreciate your being here and your interest in this. Thank you. Our next person in this group, customers, is Philip Simpson. Phil, would you like to introduce yourself and list your top topic?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Phil Simpson, and I've participated with Don and others since the IRP process back in 2017. And I guess in general, my main interest is, trying to make sure that we transition to a zero carbon electricity system in the most efficient and cost effective way so that we keep costs under control. And I would just note that, you know, the rationale there is that low electricity costs are important to avoid energy cost burdens for low income customers, and also to help all customers move away from natural gas for home heating. I think it's key that we keep electricity costs low as we do this transition to make that transition affordable for everybody. The kinds of things I'm talking about are load management and rate design that really help reduce the peak requirements without building too many more resources.
Great, thank you, Phil. Appreciate you being here. Next stakeholder is Randy Rankin, also customer. Randy, would you like to introduce yourself and list your top topic?
Yes. Well, a customer, I'm also president of Sustainable Engineering, an energy management company. We offer energy audits to commercial and small industrial clients and also serve organizational energy programs. My top interest is the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions through the fastest sustainable means possible.
Great. Thank you, Randy. Appreciate you being here. The next person, Renee Frank. Renee, are you here from Smart Living and also in as a customer? So Renee Frank.
I believe Renee told us that she wouldn't be able to make it today.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Well, we will circle back to Renee in the future. How about Ruth Jor? Ruth, I've not pronounced your name right. Ruth, are you here?
I am here, and it's Ruth Jari, and I'm an affordable housing advocate, and I'm with Dawn's group. And I'm interested in the reliability of services in less populated areas and the role that renewables will play in meeting the needs in those areas.
Great. Thank you, Ruth. And thank you for forwarding us some names of some additional people that might be interested. We greatly appreciate that.
Great.
Last person in this particular group is Steve Fishman, also an interested and knowledgeable stakeholder. So Steve, please introduce yourself and any of your things that rise to the top of your radar screen for this process.
Sure. Again, my name is Steve Fishman, and I'm the former chair of the Public Regulation Commission. And coming from that perspective, I'm a generalist. I really like looking at how we put all the pieces together to make it all work better. So I'm very excited about EPE's proposal to do an integrated systems plan. I do have a specific interest. I think there's going to be a lot of action in the whole distribution area going forward. So, you know, at a less granular level than some of the other things, I want to be sure we don't lose sight of that in this process.
Great. Thank you for being here and for championing this revised rule that we're working under. So appreciate that very much, Steve.
Thank you.
I'd like to skip to the General Services Administration. I think we have two individuals who RSVP'd from GSA, General Services Administration, Federal Procurement Functions. Is Christine or Jay here to introduce themselves? From the GSA, General Services Administration, Federal Procurement.
Jump on. I'm Kyle Smith, the attorney for and lead for the Department of Defense and the federal executive agencies, which includes GSA.
Yep.
We've got several people on. I don't think Jay made it on. I thought I saw Christine earlier, and I'll let her speak for herself if she's still on. I think we also have BJ Tomlinson from Fort Bliss, and Craig spoke earlier from White Sands Missile Range. I'm not sure whether or not we have someone from Holloman Air Force Base or not, but I'll let you get to them when you get to them. For myself, I will be the lead for that group. I'm a regulatory attorney that represents the government in these proceedings around the country. And I think one of our main issues, but I'll let the other individuals speak for the installations themselves as to what those installations' main issues are. But we are looking to site generation on our land that can be grid facing in most cases, that would also provide us some resilience on our military installations. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Margie, I believe we've lost your audio.
Gosh, okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back. It just once in a while you cut out for 10 seconds, but
Oh, sorry. So great. Any others from the military installations that Kyle had mentioned in his introduction that would like to come off and introduce themselves? Okay, perhaps we'll circle back to them. Let's now go to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, and we might have two people from that organization. Would you like to come off and introduce yourself, Mark or Dean?
Sure, this is Mark Trujillo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. Yeah, I noticed Dean and also Javier Casas is also on. I don't think he's labeled as IBEW, but we build electrical systems for a living. So we are interested in all facets of everything that's being discussed today. Transmission, distribution, as well as building out additional resources. So we train electrical workers via apprenticeship programs. One thing that interests us particularly is timing for anticipation of manpower needs, and those types of things. We work closely with our international office, to IBEW and Local 583 out of El Paso. And we have members scattered throughout the region. We're based out of Albuquerque, but we do participate statewide, and we have jurisdiction also in El Paso area as far as distribution of electrical lines. So we appreciate you all and look forward to working together for the IRP for El Paso Electric.
Great, thanks, Mark. I see Dean is on camera too. Dean, would you like to introduce yourself and list your top topic of interest?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Dean Wine. I'm the Renewable Energy Government Affairs Coordinator for the IBEW in our district, which includes New Mexico, Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And like Mark said, I mean, we always want to see our members get the work and have well-trained, well-paid, safe workers doing these projects. And we do build all aspects of these projects, basically from generation all the way to transmission, distribution, and to the customer use. And just my own personal thing in my job, all this renewable and clean energy, I don't know, I think there's a couple terawatts of energy waiting to be connected to the grid. So I'm very interested in trying to streamline the process to interconnect new power to the grid and to maximize the use of the grid through DERs and stuff in the meantime to try and bolster capacity, even if you can't interconnect everything right away. So that's just a personal thing I'm interested in.
Great, thank you, Dean. Appreciate you being here. I see Javier is on as well, and I'm gonna just to do a quick reminder, we're doing 45 seconds each person. So if you're organization has a quick introduction, great. Otherwise, please focus on what is your topic of interest. Yes, please go ahead, Javier.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm going to be real fast. Mark and Dean pretty much said it all. Javier Casas out of El Paso, Texas, and we do represent members of El Paso Electric Local 960, which work for El Paso Electric, and also 583, which also do the construction side of it, you know, outside the sections of El Paso Electric. And our main interest, like I said, we want to be on top of all the projects that are coming up, like Mark and Dean stated.
Great, thank you. We very much appreciate you all being here. You're a very important part of the big cog in the wheel of construction, so thank you. Let me go to the Madral Law Firm. Joan Drake, are you here with Madral Law Firm? Joan, I don't see her. How about from NAI First Valley? First Valley, Randy McMillan. Have you joined us today, and would you like to do an introduction from NAI First Valley? Right, I don't see Randy. The New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light, which is, I believe, Clara Sims. Clara, are you here? Would you like to do an introduction? New Mexico Interfaith Power and Light. Don't see anybody there. I know we have a couple of representatives from the New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission Authority, New Mexico RETA. Chris or Lynn or Eric, any of you like to come off mute and give an introduction and your top topic?
Sure thing. Thanks, Margie. My name's Eric Obo. I'm the Deputy Director of New Mexico RETA. We're the New Mexico Renewable Energy Transmission Authority. We assist folks in putting together high voltage transmission systems to help the grid. And we're interested in the whole enchilada. There's going to be significant demand growth. You've got a lot of old and retiring infrastructure. You need to bring more renewables onto your network because of the policy mandates. So we're just looking to see what are those things, you know, how do you mesh those all together to make it work? So that's pretty much it. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Eric. Are any of your other colleagues here that would like to introduce themselves from RETA?
No, they're at the Roundhouse. Thanks.
Gotcha. It's busy season in Santa Fe. Great. Thanks for being here. The New Mexico State Land Office has also expressed interest in participating. Jim or Jacques from the New Mexico State Land Office, would you like to introduce yourself and your topic?
And good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jim Bordigari. I'm the Director of Commercial Resources for the New Mexico State Land Office. And my team handles the distribution through rights-of-way on state trust land. And we have another division that also handles the production side for renewable energy. I think the land office would like to be, our big thing is we'd like to be brought into projects sooner than later. So that we have an idea of where the projects are proposed to be sited so that we can take a look at things and avoid problems down the road. It's really difficult for us to react quickly when we're brought in at the back end of a project. So we can be helpful on the front end, and we look forward to participating in this group and to projects with everybody. Thank you.
Right, thanks, Jim, for being here. Appreciate it. The next group we'd like to hear from is the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission. You already heard an introduction from Arthur O'Donnell. I know we have some additional members of the PRC here. Would Cynthia Miguel or Orland like to come off mute and introduce yourself and your top topic of interest?
Hi, Cynthia Mitchell here. I'm consultant to the PRC on IRP, and Ed Rilkoff is here, the Director of Staff.
Yes, and I'd just like to mention that the Utility Division is advocacy staff, and that means that staff's role is to balance the interests of the ratepayers, the utility, and the public. And in terms of key topics, well, I'll just mention that staff reviews all the key topics, but to name one, I'll just start with affordability and ratepayer impact. And I think we have Orland Whitney is here as well. I can't see him on my screen.
I'm sorry, Ed, can I ask you to say that again? Affordability and ratepayer
impact.
Impact. Thank you.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Ed and Cynthia. Miguel and Orland, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, let me jump in real quick. My name is Orland Whitney. I'm an engineer with the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, and my primary goal is to ensure that El Paso Electric's long-term resource plan, this 20-year plan, is evaluated and understanding implications on reliability, effectiveness, and regulatory compliance. So, in particular, I'm interested in how this differs from the 2021 IRP, particularly in integration of battery energy storage systems, or BESS. And that includes whether all planned deployments will follow a 4 megawatt and include some number of a megawatt hour configuration, and how these resources will support grid stability for us. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Orland. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Miguel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. You've already heard from some of the staff members as well as Arthur. I just want to say hello. My name is Miguel Perez. I'm an economist, and I serve as the economic advisor to the commissioners at the New Mexico PRC. So as Ed was saying, you know, the utility division is here advocating for ratepayers, and I'm working on the advisory side. So my main goal is kind of just to see the stakeholder engagement processes that we have in play, as well as how the IRP process works. So thank you. And again, thank you to the facilitators, El Paso Electric, and stakeholders.
Great, thanks, Miguel. We look forward to having you part of this process. The New Mexico State University has some individuals who expressed an interest in being here. New Mexico State University, they're in Las Cruces. Patricia or Wayne, or would you like to do an introduction and your top topic of interest? Patricia or Wayne from New Mexico State University. Okay, we'll continue on our list. The Nucleus Digital Assets Incorporated. Harvey Powers from Nucleus Digital Assets Incorporated. Are you here and would like to introduce yourself and a top topic? Okay, I don't see Harvey. What about from the Organ Mountain Solar and Electric? Organ Mountain Solar and Electric, Corey Asbill. Are you here, Corey?
Yeah, thank you, Margie, and thank you, everyone. It's an honor to be here. I'm CEO and founder of Organ Mountain Solar and Electric here in Las Cruces. We're a small little outfit, and I'm proud to be a part of Don Kurtz's group, as a few others have mentioned. Our primary interest is really in the momentum towards battery storage systems and virtual power plants, as they may have a role in this, and the potential and maybe even hopefully not off topic, use of creative rate structures to incentivize people towards that. So areas like that, and also more generally economic development in our area, and more specifically really in the New Mexico side. Sorry, Texas, but really that is important to me. So thank you. It's an honor. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Corey. Appreciate you being here. The next group is Panorama Energy Partners. John Forrester from Panorama Energy Partners. Would you like to do introduction?
He had to run to the airport.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Is somebody, we will circle back to him. How about Primus Builders? R. Kirby from Primus Builders. Would you like to do an introduction and your top topic? From Primus Builders. Right, I don't see them. How about Wraith Capital Partners? Robert Jackson from Wraith Capital Partners. Would you like to do an introduction?
Hi, Rob Jackson, Wraith Capital Partners. I think my primary interest here is the expansion of the El Paso Electric service territory or service in general. And as it relates to delivering service to new developments in the area.
Great, thanks you, Rob. Thank you for being here, Rob. I think Jim Desjardins from the Renewable Energy Industries of New Mexico had to leave. Is there someone else from the Industry Association, the Renewable Energy Industries of New Mexico, that would like to do introduction? Okay, we've got a few more here. How about the Solar Smart Living? Lorenzo Perea from Solar Smart Living. Would you like to introduce yourself and your top topic of interest? Lorenzo Perea from Solar Smart Living. No, and moving on, Southwestern Regional Housing and Community. Veronica Molina from the Southwestern Regional Housing and Community Organization. Would you like to introduce yourself? Don't see anyone from that group. How about from Tri-State Generation and Transmission? Vince Martinez or someone else from Tri-State Generation and Transmission. Would you like to do an introduction? All right, and then the last one I have on the RSVP list was Jay Blaine. I don't have an organization for this person, Jay Blaine. Would you like to do an introduction if you're here?
Yes, hi. Yeah, sorry, full name Joshua Blaine Simmons. I'm the Executive Director Emeritus for Eco El Paso, and my areas of concern and interest are the direct generation, integration, implementation that is ongoing, and future plans throughout the El Paso Electric coverage area.
Great, Joshua, and you are from Eco El Paso. Thank you for adding that into the participant list. We'll be sure we update your organization there in our future correspondence. At this point, I would like to now open it up to a 45-second opportunity for anyone who has not had an opportunity to come on camera and state your topic of interest. So let's, I apologize. Let's start with Chris. Go ahead, Chris Leger.
Yeah, thank you so much. Chris Leger, I'm an attorney with the Interwest Energy Alliance. Interwest is a regional trade association of grid-scale renewable developers working in conjunction with environmental partner organizations. Our primary goal here is to support an IRP action plan that results in a transparent, fair, and competitive RFP so that the PRC and EPE customers know that the market has to offer will be submitted and ultimately selected for any resource needs. This includes, for this purpose, supporting the integration of transmission, generation, and regionalization planning in a holistic manner that allows for low-cost, long-term synergies, and supporting the utilization of best practices, such as capacity calculations that are true to operational realities, specifically that thermal plants are using ELCCs and not any other capacity methods, and that ELCCs include things like correlated outages for gas units. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate your being here. Glenn, and then Marilee. Glenn, go ahead, please, with your introduction.
Hi, my name's Glenn Weichel, and I'm with Third Act New Mexico. Third Act's a nationwide environmental justice organization made up of volunteers over the age of 60. We focus on PRC advocacy, especially for the expansion of solar energy. My concern is I'd like to see a virtual power plant as part of the IRP action plan. The legislature was on the verge of passing a requirement for virtual power plants, but at the last minute decided to postpone it so utilities could implement pilot programs first. So it's time for the pilot program. Virtual power plants, known as VPPs, are an evolution of demand response. demand side management, and distributed generation and storage management programs. They're typically carbon free, and they reduce the need to build new capacity to meet system peaks, therefore reducing rates.
Great, thanks, Glenn. Appreciate you being here. Mara Lee, please go ahead with your introduction and top topic of interest.
Yes, my name is Mary Lee Souls. I am a customer of El Paso Electric, and I have participated in their last 3 integrated resource plans ever since 2014. My particular interest as a ratepayer is to understand how El Paso Electric proposes to invest my ratepayer dollars to serve my community and to do it in a result that is cost-effective, clean, reliable, and responsive.
Excellent, great. Thanks, Marilee. Appreciate you being here. Looks like Gideon Elliott. Gideon would you like to introduce yourself and tell us what your topic is?
My name is Gideon Elliott. I'm from the New Mexico Department of Justice, and our primary interest, we represent residential and small business customers throughout the state. We are primarily interested in this IRP in understanding the revenue requirement as it relates to achieving the goals of the Energy Transition Act. So not just 5 years, but 10 and 15 years out. And so we know that the IRP traditionally doesn't include certain costs and components of a utility's plans over that horizon, but we're interested in getting a whole picture. So thank you. And unfortunately, I have to drop off.
No, thanks, Gideon, for being here. I see Alan Downs. Alan, you've got your hand up. Please go ahead with your introduction.
There. Hi, I'm Alan Downs. I'm also part of Don Kurtz's group. This will be my 4th IRP. My top IRP interest is getting to 0 emissions. So on the generation side, that means wind, solar, batteries, and transmission. And on the IRP rule, the 17736 Section A is what El Paso Electric quoted in their stuff, which is the most cost-effective portfolio. But as Dawn also mentioned, there's also the D1 that talks about complying with greenhouse gas emissions reduction and grid modernization. So that's where my primary interest is. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Alan. Appreciate you being here. Let's see, Luke Eilert, please go ahead with your introduction and your top topic.
Yeah, Luke Eiler with Blue Road Investments. And so we're building industrial in Santa Teresa, and some of our potential clients come to us and they ask about power availability. And so we'd like to know who to inquire with about that, and then also lead time for equipment.
Great, thanks, Luke. Important considerations there. I see a number of other folks that we have not heard from on the participant list.
I think.
But we'll give anybody a chance who has not introduced themselves or offered their topic of interest. And thank you to those who've added expansion of your thoughts in the chat. This helps a tremendous amount because we'll be taking the information and doing a mapping of the top topics to help guide our next steps in the process. So don't be bashful about putting things into the chat. Others, I see Christian, perhaps you're off mute. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us your top topic?
I am sorry if I missed it earlier. Christian Perez-Giese with CBRE. We are handling industrial real estate in El Paso, southern New Mexico, and northern Mexico, representing both developers and, more importantly, users. And one of the biggest issues we have right now is the availability of power for new industrial developments and companies that are looking at setting up manufacturing operations in the region.
Great, thank you, Christian. Others, I would like to do introduction. I see Carrie Olson, Keith Herman, Matt Keenan. Any of you like to do an introduction?
Keith Herman with, I'm outside counsel for Doñana County, just generally focused on affordable, reliable energy.
Excellent. Thank you, Keith. And thank you to Doñana County that was offered to host our workshop in March, where we will be in person. So thank you for being willing to host us there when we travel to Las Cruces for a workshop in March. Carrie, yes, I see you're off mute. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us your topic?
Hi, my name's Carrie Olson. I'm with the law firm of Spencer Fain up in Santa Fe, and I'm outside regulatory counsel for El Paso Electric Company. So here on their behalf.
Oh, great. Okay, thanks, Carrie. Ryan Brown, please go ahead with your introduction.
Hi, so my name is Ryan Brown, energy policy analyst. I've previously been an intervener with NMPRC and also PUC of Texas regarding El Paso Electric. My interests are in terms of proposed renewable energy capacity additions, how will that be allocated between the two state jurisdictions? Additionally, I'm interested in what role hydrogen will play, if any, and additionally, any potential additions of transmission between potentially ERCOT or further interconnection to SPP if that offers alternatives to the current planning. Thanks.
Great, thanks. Ryan, I don't see that we have your email address. Would you mind putting that into the chat if you would like to continue to receive information about this process? We're happy to add you to that list. Thanks.
Okay, no problem.
Appreciate it. Matt, I see you've come on camera. Would you like to introduce yourself?
This is Matt Keenan from Grid United. We specialize in the development of utility scale AC and DC transmission projects, and we're here to just continue to support the reliable, robust, and resilient power grid of the future. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, Matt, thanks for being here. Anyone else like to introduce themselves and give us their top topic of interest? Kathy and Deb, did I miss any hands that you see up, or is there any? Please, anybody come off mute if you would like to introduce yourself if we've missed anyone.
Sure, this is Terry McLaughlin with Alta Mesa Estates. We're a developer in the Santa Teresa, Sunland Park, Horizon, Northeast El Paso, and Chaparral area. And our main interest is just having a much better understanding on capacity, good areas, what I would call a go area, or a slightly more challenging area might be a no-go area, some sort of indication as to where investment has a utility capacity. We've been investing 15 years, lots of acreage, and we're getting a lot of calls from likes of realtors that are just confused as to whether a logistics operation could go in that would have a very low capacity to a heavy manufacturing that would have a high capacity to a data center which could have much more demand for utility and water. So just a real better understanding of where the areas that are much easier to provide capacity and energy for would be a huge help to us in the development industry. Thank you very much.
Great, Terry, thank you. And thanks for coming on. And we glad you spoke up as we passed by you at Alta Mesa at the beginning of our roll call. So thank you for volunteering to speak. Appreciate that.
No problem at all. Thank you.
Anyone else like to introduce themselves? I don't see any other requests. This is an amazing group of people, and your topics
Margie, I think maybe you froze
will
again.
be attempting to create a map of the areas that are most interesting. And so we will be taking this information and collapsing it to something that can guide our
Margie, we lost.
There you go. You're back.
Gosh.
I just get little hiccups here.
I'm sorry about that if we've been having an issue. So that ends our introductions. We'll be taking the information and processing it, hopefully to guide our next steps. I'd like to now go back to the
Margie, before
slide.
you jump on, if I could just reference, there's been a lot coming through the chat. We will be capturing all of it. I have not been able to respond to each and every one of you, but we see you in there. We will be compiling all of that and pulling together themes and ideas from questions. So just know if I didn't respond to you individually, we will definitely capture it at the end of the meeting. So thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. That's very helpful, Kathy, for our results. Deb, if you could go back one slide, please. Just to recap what we've done today. So we've had a brief tip of the iceberg presentation from the EPE team about the system and posed some great topics to follow up on. We've heard from many stakeholders, your interests. We will be processing that to help guide the next steps in these workshops. We would like to ask, as you consider participating as a stakeholder in the rest of this process, that you help us by providing actionable feedback regarding the statement of need, the action plan, and modeling runs, and we'll provide opportunities for you to do that. Please attend as many workshops as you might be able to fit in, or if you can't attend, please review the summaries from those workshops. We will have materials posted in advance, and we encourage you to look at those ahead of time. Even send your comments with other colleagues if that's appropriate for you. It's likely we'll put together at least one working group on modeling, maybe more. So if you're interested in working a bit offline on certain topics, please keep that in mind. And we're also asking that you consider the views and inputs of all the other people you've heard today. As you can hear, the interests are broad, and our job is to not only enable stakeholders to be heard by the electric utility, but we'd like you stakeholders to be able to appreciate where other stakeholders are coming from and appreciate those interests. We'll also ask you to share your experience and expertise. If necessary, maybe there's a topic that you would like to present to the group for information. So these are all areas where we hope you consider participating as we go forward. Next steps in our process, the slide next shows we're orienting this process in 3 phases. We're currently in our orientation and identifying stakeholder issues, getting some baseline information. We will be doing that today and in a workshop 2 weeks from today, and then in a hybrid in-person plus virtual workshop in Las Cruces on March 11th. Phase 2 will be really digging deep into modeling runs that will inform the statement of need and action plan conversations. And then in the latter part, the 3rd phase of the process, July through September, we'll be doing reviews, giving feedback on the document, and also asking your input on how this process worked for you. So that is our plan. We do not yet have the dates set for the April through September workshops, but we are working on that. I know many of you would like to be able to put dates on your calendar. We'll try to get those to you as quickly as possible. At this point, I would like to ask, some of you mentioned in your introduction that you're interested in modeling. If you are a person who's interested in these modeling conversations in detail, please put your name into the chat with the word modeling. We would like to know how big that group is and work on some process for engaging people who really do want to dig into those details of modeling assumptions, inputs, outputs, scenarios to be run. So please, at this point, when we go into questions here at the end, please let us know if you are interested in the modeling conversations. If you want to think about it, we'll have our email at the end and you can send me an email to let us know. But we're really very interested in brokering conversations and setting up ways for modeling discussions to happen in detail, but we know that not everybody will be interested in those topics. So thank you for putting your name into the chat if you're interested in modeling. At this point, I would like to open up the floor for questions. Any questions, first of all, on this stakeholder engagement process? I see a question in the chat. Yes, these proceedings, this meeting is being recorded. We will prepare a written short summary that will be posted on the GridWorks website, and it will have a link to the recording of this meeting as well. Are there other questions about, first of all, the stakeholder engagement process, and then we'll open it up to other questions before we adjourn? Questions on the process? Any questions that you have? We'll give about 10 minutes if there are other questions that people want to raise. I see there was someone also who would like to do an introduction. Alton Looper. Alton, would you like to come off mute and introduce yourself and state your comment? I'm sorry we missed you in the introductions. Alton Looper? Are you able to come off mute?
It's hard to figure out the new technology, you know.
Gotcha.
I'm a retired consumer. That's my limit of my interest. As I said in my note to you, I didn't see a representative for the NASA engine test facility on the Las Cruces side of the mountain, and I'm sure they would be interested in what the plans are. And my interest is just improving the reliability of the system and looking toward more distributed generation and yeah, just improving the reliability. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Alton. We will reach out, and I think Kyle Smith can help us in a contact with the White Sands Missile Range Test Facility folks. So we will reach out to them and include them in the invitation. So thank you for suggesting that.
Yeah, I did want to say we have someone who he's not on today, but we expect him to participate in future workshops.
Great, thanks, Kyle. Any other questions?
Margie, I might jump in as someone who's been watching the chat pretty closely. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions and lots of really good ideas and good groundwork for us as we get further into this. A couple themes that I'm seeing that EPE team, I might ask you if you could respond. Very early in the presentation, a gentleman brought up the regulation on the most cost-effective portfolio. As Judy, you shared with us that is what EPE will be working to identify in the action plan. A question about cost-effective versus cost benefits versus lowest cost. And I'm wondering if the EPE team can address that, particularly cost effective versus lowest cost, how you think about that.
Hey, Kathy, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Judy.
Okay, great. Yes, I see. So as I said earlier in the presentation, you know, we're going to be complying and adhering to all aspects of the IRP rule. I just kind of took a snapshot of my presentation of some of the things that we would be addressing. Same thing with Appendix A. We'll either be addressing those in a future presentation and or our IRP plan that we'll be filing. But looking at those, I think those translate into like the modeling as well. And Kathy, as you and Margie stated, you know, this is the first of several presentations that we will be giving. We will be addressing this also with the modeling. And I think as we break into those working groups that you mentioned, but also talk about the modeling, I think those things will also be addressed. And that could help give the stakeholders more context.
Great. Thank you, Judy. So lots to come, I think, is
Yes.
the short version there. Okay. Okay. Second theme that I've seen quite a bit in the chat is on rate designs, and whether it's time of day rates or interruptible rates. EPE team, can you give us a little context of how rate design fits into the integrated resource planning process?
Do we have anybody for rates?
Oh, sorry. Is that Emmanuel? We can barely hear you.
Sorry, we were
There you go.
asking around the room if we had a rep from rates on, because we didn't want to misspeak.
I guess I might weigh in, and I was a little late, so I'll introduce myself. Leslie Padilla, I'm an attorney for El Paso Electric. I'm usually based in Santa Fe, but came down for the afternoon. And I think rate design is generally outside of the scope of the IRP rule. I just did a quick word search, rates. So I don't know that utilities generally address it. I suppose if there's interest in exploring or learning about rate design, you know, it's possible we could invite one of our subject matter experts here one day, but I think the answer is probably that rate design is generally outside the scope of resource planning. Or
hey, Leslie, can I sort of add to that?
Sure.
This is Jim Schiestel. I'm with El Paso Electric. What we have done in the past, and I think where rate design works into the IRP historically, is its effect on the demand profile that we're addressing over the 20 years. So for example, the question of what resources to procure for purposes of serving demand starts with what our demand projection is over the next 20 years. And so rate design can affect that, what that demand profile looks like over time. So for example, time of day rates, other sorts of peak time rebate, or I should say demand DR rates, demand side programs and things like that can affect what that profile, utility profile looks like that the resources have to serve. And so rate design and what rates look like and price response and all those sorts of things work into the IRP through the demand profile for the next 20 years.
Well, that's a better answer than I gave, Jim. Thank you. I'm glad you're here.
I've done it before, so
Margie?
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jim, for that answer. Really appreciate it. Yeah, I was going to say, I think in the rule through DERs and demand, it is implied that rates could be there, but you know, it just depends how strictly you want to interpret. But I think we should be flexible to do some rate review because it can have a big impact on how you plan all the other pieces to fit together. So Jim, thank you for your input, and I totally agree with you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Kathy, anything else in the themes that you wanted to bring to the attention of the team?
Yeah, I'll bring up one more, and then if we have time, we want to ask for hands. But the last piece is large developer concerns of meeting large new loads that might be coming on. What kind of information can EPE share with developers, in particular the growth in southern New Mexico, so that folks in that area know whether there's power availability? And maybe EPE team, the route here is that something you intend to address on future meetings?
It is. Actually, it is something that we're going to be addressing as we start to get into the modeling sensitivities. That's going to be one concern that we address there.
Okay. Okay, so watch for it in the sensitivities for those of you that are interested in that might join the modeling group to make sure those sensitivities comport with what you're seeing as a developer. So Margie, that's my thematic. I know there's a lot more in here, and we will certainly spend quite a bit of time after this meeting to work through all the questions, but I'll hand it back to you.
This is Anastasia Stevens. I've got my hand raised.
I was going to go to you when Kathy was done. Go ahead, Anastasia.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to chime in on the rate design question, and whatever the rule says, the statute refers to lists along with supply side resources, load management. So if you see rate design as part of the continuum of load management, it's it's right in here.
Great, thank you.
As opposed to going out and pretending to put out a bid for a load management project, it's, if load management is part of the company's function as well as something you go out and kind of treat as a standalone resource, it's in here. It should be in here. My 2 cents. My 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yes, other hands up for questions.
This is Leslie Padilla again. I just remembered something that goes to the previous question. The New Mexico Commission has an open docket right now on grid readiness and economic development. A number of parties have submitted comments so far in that docket, and the Commission's holding a workshop this Thursday. There will be representatives of all 3 of New Mexico's investor-owned utilities who are making presentations about serving new customers with a focus on large load customers. So the folks who are interested in that issue may want to tune into the Commission's special meeting on Thursday.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. That's good information. Any other questions that people have before we show you what's planned for our next 2 workshops? I know it's been a long afternoon and you all are probably Zoom tired, so thank you for hanging in there. Our next steps, as I mentioned, we'll be creating a summary from this workshop and we'll be posting it on our website, on the GridWorks website. It will include a link to a recording of this meeting. Our team will be processing all the input that we receive from stakeholders on topics of interest to help guide what happens at workshop number 2. Workshop number 2 will be 2 weeks from today, also by Zoom, and it will feature a number of more in-depth presentations by our EPE and E3 colleagues. And so there will be time for those presentations and questions and answers. Please recognize that we're still building a shared foundation of knowledge amongst our stakeholders. We will also include any voices that have been recognized as missing so far, and so there may be some new stakeholders join us for that meeting, that workshop. Following that, we are planning for a most of a day workshop in Las Cruces on March 11th. We will allow, we're encouraging in-person attendance, but we also will have some Zoom opportunities for limited interaction. We know it will not be as complete as being in the room, but we're going to try to accommodate virtual participation. So this will be a hybrid workshop. We are still working on the design of that, but I can imagine some detailed conversations on modeling scenarios, and that maybe in a subgroup. We don't know yet, but please put March 11th on your calendar if you have interest in joining us in Las Cruces for that workshop. So with that, let me thank all of you for your interest in this topic and your participation, your expertise, your knowledge. We will be building on your knowledge, and El Paso Electric has already proven to us at GridWorks to be a great collaborative partner. And so we're looking forward to working with that team through this process as well. Please, we'll leave the Zoom meeting open for another 5 minutes in case there's anything else you wanted to add into the chat. That would be any topics of interest you didn't describe. If you're interested in modeling and anything else that we didn't cover, please put it in there. That is our mechanism for tracking your input. And I will ask my colleague Deb to put the link in the chat for the gridworks.org website on this project so that you can get access to information both from this workshop and for future workshops. My email address is here on this slide. And of course, I'm sure most of you have Deb Shields' address as well, as she's been communicating with you with endless reminders to this meeting. We are really thrilled with the participation and the content of this meeting. So let me ask Deborah or Kathy if you have any other final remarks before we close.
Website is in the chat for you. And I also found the PRC informational workshop on Thursday. So there's a link there for you as well. So thank you, everybody. And we look forward to working with you.
Deborah, anything from your end we need to do for folks on logistics or anything else?
If you haven't already, if you could share your organization and your email address so I can be sure to include you on upcoming information and update you on a recap of this meeting. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much, and thank you. Big round of applause for our El Paso Electric team. Thank you for all you're doing in this first time through this process for you. So thank you for all your for being here and for participating fully. Thank you.